You're now listening to the Something Good Podcast Network. Please press any key to continue.
A kiss, as defined by Dan Webster, is something pleasing, a caress, a gentle touch. But there's another kiss that isn't in Webster's.
Hey world, we're kids!
Some critics say they don't make music, they just make noise.
Yeah, Kiss sucks!
Kiss implies the extreme in the theatrics on stage, utilizing fire and smoke and bizarre costumes, and the ever-consistent, constant concealment of their true identities.
Speaking of which, Kiss is going to have its own comic book soon.
Take Kiss with you. It's fun. Show your friends and be the first. Now.
Oh my God, no time to turn!
And welcome once again to No Time to Turn, a Kiss nerd podcast.
Nerds. Fucking nerds.
And we have been tracing and tracking the history of Kiss year by year, album by album. And we're really just getting rolling on this thing. And again, the caveat is we are not experts, nor do we claim to be. But
no, we're just three fans that know and love this band so much that we could decided to make a podcast out of it.
We always find ourselves talking about it. Sooner or later, I think of a certain generation, you hang out long enough, and eventually the conversation steers to Kiss. And
exactly,
both whether you love them or hate them. But so we've been, I guess, rolling along. We're into 1975.
That's correct.
They're on tour in support of Dressed to Kill.
Mm-hmm. Getting kicked off of tours.
They're kind of in this weird catch-22 mode where, they're trying to get the band in front of as many eyes as possible. They'd rather them be on opening act for bigger acts rather than headlining smaller halls on their own, but they can't seem to gain any traction in that. They're primarily still playing, I guess at this point, headlining small or medium-sized, theaters.
Yeah. It's kind of playing like the most famous example is probably the Winterland in San Francisco. That's on all those DVDs and YouTube videos.
Well, places of that size, there's the Capitol Theater in New Jersey, and I guess the Michigan Theater in Detroit, and places like this, 3,000 seat kind of venues. But kind of want to kind of backpedal just a little bit because there's some interesting stuff going on. Everything, of course, is moving super fast,
supersonic speeds. I know they're already in new album mode post Dressed to Kill.
Well, prior to Dressed to Kill, we probably should have touched on this on the last episode, but I oversighted this, and that's my fault. But, the production team of Kenny Kerner and Richie Wise approached Neil Bogart about moving Kiss to a different label. They're pulling their power play here. This works for them, I don't know.
That is a big detail.
But it's also interesting to note that Kiss isn't signed to Casablanca at this point necessarily. They're signed to Bill Aucoin. They're signed to the Rocksteady Management, which is Bill Aucoin and Joyce Biowitz. They are the ones that are signed to Casablanca, and the advance was only $15,000.
Yeah,
which at that era might have been, for an independent label, okay.
Now, but that does conflate a little bit with the whole narrative of we'll make you our manager if you can get us a record deal.
Well, yeah, but I think he already had an in on with Casablanca, which of course would have predated Casablanca, but
yeah, because that seems to be
Neil
the one
Bogart
bit of info that everyone agrees actually happened.
Well, the idea was they were gonna. He felt reasonably certain that he could get them the recording contract. I mean, he gave a 30-day.
Yeah,
which is unusual, but it worked out. But at this point, they've got two albums. Neither one of them have been successful. The second record not as successful as the first, which is never a good thing.
It's like the first album already flopped, and this one flopped harder.
Well, they wouldn't say necessarily flopped, but they're definitely enjoying a sophomore slump, enjoying being
as a new band already.
hardly enjoying. But they're gaining a lot of traction. I think it's interesting to note here that although there's not a lot of commercial interest in KISS at this point, there obviously seems to be some professional interest in KISS in this point.
It's all because of the live show.
Partly, yeah, but they're seeing some sort. I mean, obviously, if there's no commercial support yet, there's professional support. They're seeing that there's a potential for commercial.
Right.
Commercial interest.
They still have all the faith in the world in them.
Well, certainly Casablanca does, but now if Richie Wise and Kenny Kerner thinks they can move them to another label, that means other labels are interested. This will prove true a little bit later on. This is going to be a tumultuous.
See, I even said it wrong trying to say it.
Tumultuous year for KISS. Anyhow.
Easy for us to say.
We are professional radio broadcasters.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Yeah. So,
now, kind of looking at some tour info on Dress to Kill, though, it seems as if this is actually one of the, kind of talking about tumultuous periods. See, I shouldn't have even. I tried it and I shouldn't have tried. It seems to be a crazy,
it's a rough year.
Crazy year for the band.
Rough year.
It seems like, because I'm double checking through KissConcertHistory.com, which is an offshoot of the KissFAQ.com.
Okay.
And they're saying that this was a pretty important tour for the band, specifically the Beacon Show. The Beacon Show that happened on, I just lost the date, it was right in front of me, on March 21st.
Well, that was set up with Ron Delsner, who was the promoter in New York, and
thinking it was going to do well.
Yeah, he didn't think he would do well, and he kind of did it as a favor, and it sold out, I think, pretty straight away, enough that they put up a second show, and I think that one sold out as well. Is that right?
There were 3 warm-up gigs booked before, and then there was 2 shows booked for the Beacon one. But this was also the first string of shows to morph the intro into, ladies and gentlemen, the hottest band in the land, KISS.
Yeah, that was allegedly the idea of J.R. Smalling. Do you know where he got that idea from, or where he claims to have gotten it? And I believe that's true.
I've heard the story, but you'll have
it's
to...
not immediately ringing the bell.
Yeah, me neither.
There was a television commercial at the time for Toyota, and that was their tagline. You wanted the best, you got it. Toyota.
Oh, okay.
I mean, yeah, it works.
And
simple.
that's where because prior to that, Sean Delaney had been doing, put your 2 lips together and kiss, which is terrible.
Yes, it is.
And Sean Delaney is the unsung hero in early KISS. In my opinion, I think he doesn't get the credit that he is due for a lot of stuff, but that is not one of his better ideas. But they're those are the Beacon shows are the first headlining shows for KISS in New York City. Mm-hmm. And those are very important shows to them.
Who's on that bill, or is it just KISS?
That's a good question.
It says right here, JoJo Gunn and Blue Oyster Cult.
That was kind of their the band they toured with the most in the early days, wasn't it?
What's that?
Blue Oyster Cult?
No, not necessarily. They played shows with the famous turnaround was that they opened for Blue Oyster Cult on New Year's Eve 73, 74.
Yeah.
And then 75, 76 New Year's Eve. It's usually they cited a year later, but I think it was 2 years later. Blue Oyster Cult was opening for KISS, and that's right. That's always like they opened for BOC, but then BOC was opening for them.
See, that's the legend, though. That's one you always print.
Well, yeah.
And then there's a few other kind of random shows they had with Man and James and the Gang.
James Gang.
Yep, James Gang.
It's like James and the Gang. I was like, we watched a video on them yesterday.
I conflated the and.
Joe Walsh himself.
Well, he was probably not in James Gang, I think, by that point.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I forgot about that. They went on without him.
Yeah. But going back to all this business stuff, there's a lot going on here. What ends up happening here that's important to note is Kenny Kerner and Richie Wise move in and say, we can move KISS to another label.
Yeah, so who are they kind of...
Because Casablanca has not paid any royalties yet.
Nope.
Because there's no money.
Exactly.
So everyone's in this weird catch-22. And Neil Bogart has bet everything on this record label. He's, to the point where he's refinanced his house. He's gone to Vegas and gambled money to make payroll. I mean, crazy stuff. But he's also started a personal relationship with Joyce Biowitz, which is Bill Aucoin's, second hand in Rocksteady management.
Okay.
This creates a massive conflict of interest now because Kiss's manager is now, one of their managers, is having a romantic relationship with the head of their record label.
Yeah. Yes, I don't know this story.
So now you've got, who is she working for? Is she working for Bill, thereby working for Kiss, or is she working for Neil and thereby working for Casablanca? Because how does Casablanca find out about this Kenny Kerner, Richie Wise thing?
Yeah.
So
gee, I wonder.
That also explains why you don't see Wise and Kerner back on board for Dress to Kill.
There it is.
And they're summarily exiled from the Casablanca scene.
Interesting. So juicy.
So in the wake of all this,
would you say that tea is hotter than hell? Yeah, I won't do that again.
So in the wake of this is all I think happening basically in the spring of '75. I guess as Dress to Kill is kind of hitting the streets. Joyce Biowitz leaves Rocksteady.
Yeah.
And marries, and will eventually marry Neil Bogart.
Okay.
So that kind of solves that problem to a degree.
That's how that relationship kind of ties
fixed
up
itself.
That's how that ties the room together in this time period.
And if I've got my information correct, at this point, this is when Casablanca renegotiates the deal. They put forth a new recording contract. This time it's with the band members.
Right.
It's with Kiss, not Bill. So that avoids the original contract, which allows a little more elbow room because they had an end date, and I think it's October that they have to pay royalties. Like they have to cough up with at least the first royalty payment. So, well, here I've got it.
I was going to say, you got the schedule on their business.
Actually, I think it's this new contract defers it to October 20th. But there's still a lot more that's going to happen in this time frame. Now, somewhere in here, the decision is made to make this live album.
Yeah.
Now, these are the things where it gets interesting to me. It's like, whose idea was this and why?
Because you've heard them discuss all the time how live albums were the death knell to bands. Double live records didn't exist.
That's not entirely true, though, because there's a bootleg market that has been rising in the early 70s.
Yeah.
And that's done really well to the point that it's become almost an issue. It's a problem in the industry, this bootleg live album deal that's been coming up, to the point where some of these labels have their own imprints. And then
before streaming, there was bootlegs.
Yeah. And the big live album at that point, the Rolling Stones had done Get Your Ya-Ya's Out, which was pretty successful, and that was to again combat the bootleg market. But
see, Made in Japan
was a big double live album, and then Humble Pie's Rockin' the Fillmore. So it wasn't unheard of. It wasn't a norm, but it wasn't abnormal either.
It wouldn't be considered a good business decision back then.
And that Humble Pie record, I think, did really, really well for Humble Pie against their studio records. More people refer to that, I think. I'm looking at this with hindsight.
Right.
So I don't know about in the time, but it seems like that had a bigger impact than their other record, their studio records, I should say.
Well, the charm of live albums was to have like advanced, more advanced or then more, lively performances of, hit songs to kind of, sell different versions of to, the consumer and things like that. And half the time, say a good example is the Deep Purple one, where the Highway Star track on that one is way more fast and way more powerful than the studio version is.
Well, that's,
in my opinion.
Well, that's the idea. You're wanting to capture a certain energy and excitement.
Yeah.
And this is going to definitely proved true for Kiss, because their studio albums certainly aren't matching what they're doing live, and I think they're just starting to really come into their power live, because now obviously we've got the hindsight. There's tons of bootlegs that have sprung up, particularly just in the last 10 or 15 years, the digital era. These recordings that have come up that I've never even, I can remember seeing bootleg live albums even back in the 80s.
Yeah.
But some of the stuff that's been popping up, I've never even knew existed.
Well, it's because that legendary term on the message boards and stuff, the hoarders, the people that have the bootleg rare recordings that hadn't put them out digitally and stuff. It's just a handful of people that have slowly started just kind of drip feeding new things out there.
But the important thing is you listen to these things and you can see the progression of them as a live act as well. And if you listen to there's board recording of them playing at the Daisy.
Yeah.
So that's 73 pre-live or pre.
And it has album. Like Peter Criss doing like the stage raps and stuff like
you
that.
Can see, but just even the performance itself, you can see how it's progression. Then you've got recordings of them on their first tour, and versus by the time they get to,
you see them like developing.
And this is also a very, very fat. You looking back, you think it's it's like 2 years time. It really isn't. It's more about 18 months.
Yeah.
And it's happening really, really, really fast. So, we're talking spring of 75.
And they just released Dress to Kill.
And for of course, the thing I have to do every time, our Charlotte, North Carolina date was April 25th at the Charlotte Park Center with Rush as the opener. Reported audience, 3,000 capacity.
Yeah, Park Center. Yeah.
A lot of shows with Rush.
There was, in that era, the Charlotte venue for most bands was the Park Center, because Charlotte wasn't the major city that it is today. Most of the big Coliseum bands usually went to Greensboro back then because it was a bigger building, and that was like the big arena for North Carolina.
Got it.
Back then.
Right.
But getting lost here. Sorry. So in May of 75, they have it in place that they're going to do this. So they've already made the decision that they're going to record these shows.
They're going to go out and tour, and the label's not going to pay for it either.
No, Bill Aucoin is still financing this on his American Express card.
Because
there's no money coming in. I saw a number somewhere that by the time they got through with this tour, that all told, and not just for this tour, but just all told, he was in about $300,000 on this.
That's what I've read too.
Wow. And in today's money, that's close to $1 million.
Oh yeah, easy.
Yeah.
But this will get resolved by the end of the year. But right now, everyone's gambling. So the record company is floundering.
Yeah.
So it looks like this might just be the end. This might be your last. This might not be your last chance at making it. This might just be your last go round.
It's like the last part of your career, and if you're going to do it, just do it with gumption and with no. They did it with conviction, and they didn't look back.
They may have, and I've never seen this stated anywhere. But I can't see how they couldn't have looked at this as being possibly a way to kind of cap off their career, because it might be over now.
Yeah.
This might be the last go-around.
They're going to make them or break them.
I don't, but,
This is after Casablanca put out that Johnny Carson record, I think.
Yeah, the Johnny Carson record is out and has completely bombed. Mm-hmm. And I think they've signed, it's interesting, in this time they've signed an all-female group called Fanny, who've had a moderate chart success. Nothing great, but it's
Fanny,
probably
Louis.
No, that's Stories.
Stories. Okay.
Yeah.
My bad. I got to look up Fanny.
Produced by Kenny Kerner and Richie Wise.
Oh, no shit.
Oh, there it is.
But Casablanca signed Fanny, and then they also signed, interestingly, T-Rex, who 3 years prior, had been as big as the Beatles ever were in Europe.
Yeah.
They never connected in America for whatever reason. They Bang a Gong was a hit, but
that was it.
They didn't. Whereas in Europe, like I said, I mean, gigantic, huge success.
I mean, he's referenced in All the Young Dudes written by David Bowie.
He's referenced in a lot of stuff. He's referenced in the Who's "You Better," you bet.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's still a titanic figure over there. Mark Bolan, he was killed in a car wreck in 1978.
Yeah, and you still don't hear his music on American classic rock radio or anything like that,
which is a shame. It is undoubtedly an influence on Kiss. But T-Rex has a deal in place with Casablanca for the American release of, I think it's Light of Love.
Yeah, and
it does nothing.
It's a good album, but yeah, you're right.
But it hasn't done anything to help Casablanca. So.
I think and then the Johnny Carson thing too. They shipped out, from what I read, 750,000 copies, thinking they were going to go gold or platinum or whatever.
Oh yeah, I don't know what they were thinking. That's
so that's so
bizarre. I mean, this is, to be fair, it's the era before there was anything like VHS or anything like this. So having these bits recorded and you can play it back is the closest thing to
a physical product of
or
entertainment.
To be able to, there's no videotape or anything. It's not like you can go back and watch the greatest hits of Carson now on YouTube or whatever.
I know it.
So this was kind of like the precursor for all that. In theory, it seems a good idea, but put into practice, it didn't work.
No.
And now they're on the hook for this. And so somebody somewhere is coughing up the money for this. That's the other thing I can't figure out is who's just putting the money into this.
So I'm in. When you saw me, just kind of my eyes kind of glossing over, reading a few things. I was kind of reading up on that because I felt that's where it was going. So yeah, they make mention that Bogart couldn't finance the tour, so a coin had to pay for it, and multiple accounts always talk about that this was their last ditch effort. So my curiosity is, before we even discuss who's fronting the money for it, if Kiss has released 3 records and not been successful, why are they putting all their remaining funds, number one, back into Kiss, and number two, how did it wind up being more cost effective to have a mobile recording van record multiple shows, and then regardless of how much was done, still go back in and do overdubs? So I'm kind of curious on how, because they always say, oh, well, it was the most cost-effective way we could do it.
And all pay Eddie Kramer.
Yeah, well, all 3 of us being in those situations, that sounds like a whole lot of manpower and money right there.
I don't have the answer to that. That's a good question.
The only thing I can think of is specifically on the fandom website, which kind of pulls from different sources. Gene mentions in his book Kiss and Makeup that very little corrective work was done in the studio, and that the studio time was strictly devoted to the mix down and the multi-track recordings, and also emphasized that Kiss couldn't have done extensive overdubbing even if they wanted to, thanks in no part to the Johnny Carson album fiasco and extremely major budget, allowing the band simply just not time to do it.
Well,
but then Eddie Kramer completely contradicts him.
Let's get to that. Let's before we get to all that, let's just talk about the shows that are recorded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
in the time frame they're done.
May 16th?
Well, the first show allegedly recorded was May 16th at Cobo, which was their first major arena sellout.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it made sense to record that. As I understand, none of that was used.
Interesting.
I don't know.
Right. None of us truly know. So what your word is just as good as mine. So I mean, shoot.
But they've already, the point I'm trying to get to is that they've already made the decision here in advance, that they're going to do this. They're going to record this stuff, to the point that they spend the previous 2 days at the Michigan Palace, I guess is what it was called, and they do the photo shoot for the album cover.
Mm-hmm.
All of the
poses, all the front cover, and all that
and stuff, and also for the inserts of the book.
Yeah.
that they're going to include. With I don't know if the packaging had even been conceived of at this point, but there was a photo shoot done for all of this.
Yeah, just getting as much promo done as possible.
Then the next day, the promotional films are done for Rock and Roll All Night, Come On and Love Me, and was that it?
Yep, they only did 2.
Yeah,
and this is an interesting thing that they're still, they're
building a campaign.
They're building some sort of campaign. Now, these promo films were probably to help promote Dress to Kill, because they're promoting, their Dress to Kill songs.
And the 70s bands really didn't use video a lot for promo, did they?
The deal, I think a large part of this was for use, conceivably for television in America, but I think probably was also more thought of to help them expand in the European market. It's putting them in places where they can't tour. How that was used back then, I don't know. But
I would imagine just a simple press kit, make up a videotape and send it, or a Betamax, whatever.
But for what show? I'm sure there were music shows that existed back then. So,
but like for lip sync performance videos before MTV, it's I don't know where you would stick that.
Well, no, I was imagining it being press because, like what Russ was saying, for like booking tours. So, you want to see what Kiss is like? Check this out.
That might be part of it too. I don't know. But for whatever promotional purposes, they film these spots. They're done at the Michigan Palace.
And I personally love them. They showed up on the Kissology box sets that came out about a little over 10 years ago, and God, it was probably longer than that now. but that, and it's interesting because there's 2 different mixes. I've seen mixes with the studio versions, and I've also seen versions with the Alive songs over top of them.
You know what? Now that you say that, I think I've seen that too.
So that's also kind of interesting that they're almost that well in tempo.
I tell you what else is. Well, yeah, that's true. Pretty consistent. What's interesting to me, and this starts a trend that you see through all their videos, and this is some. Here we go. We're going to go full nerd here.
Oh, here we go. Oh, yep. I know where you're
Gene
going.
Simmons is not playing with a pick.
I know it. He
plays with a pick live, but in all the videos, he's miming playing with his fingers.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why does he do that?
That's almost always the tell. Even if he's like doing a TV performance, it's with fingers.
He's pretending to finger. When he plays live, though, he's playing with a pick.
He did that in all the 80s videos, too. Act like he played with his fingers.
I don't know if he still does that or where that finally trails off. I haven't, but I know that's true all the way up through the 80s. He's miming, pretending to play with his fingers.
The story I've always heard is that he thought he looked cooler playing bass with his fingers.
Well, then why don't you just learn it?
No, he doesn't.
Exactly. I don't think he looks cool at all playing with his fingers.
But he seems like he wears his bass differently too. It seems like he's wearing it higher in the videos.
Yeah, because of where he has to pick at it. It's like up here to his like chest or whatever. So now he's just kind of like this, playing on his pec.
It's really odd that he would make a decision to do that. But
and what was funny is literally when we were kind of getting the origins of this show kind of started up, I had just run across a video for Is That You on YouTube, and I was telling Russ, I was like, oh, did you ever see this? And he's like, oh yeah, it's probably just a live clip synced up with the audio. I was like, maybe, but I don't know, it still looks pretty cool. And we started watching it, and then as soon as it moved over to Gene, he's thumping along on that bass with his fingers. We're like, holy shit, no, this was actually recorded for a music video. Oh my god. It's like that's the only tell we can have sometimes.
With the Star guitar.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's jumping way.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah, we'll get all that later on.
we go down nerd rabbit holes. You have to apologize.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So they record the show. They film the videos or the promotional films as they are called.
Yes.
And they do the photo shoot. So I'm assuming that they know that this is going to be used for
promo
for potentially this live recording they're going to do.
Yeah.
I'm sure Kobo was recorded and for whatever reason was deemed unusable. So they come back in June in Cleveland, which is another, again, staying in the Rust Belt. They're strong, one of the strongholds they have. They record this show. Again, as to what was used and what wasn't, we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
But then they come back a month later, and July, on the 21st, they record 2 shows in Davenport, Iowa.
And why 2 shows in that spot of all places?
Well, and that's what's unusual. It's like they did 2 shows in one day in Davenport, Iowa. I don't know the details on that.
Huh. Yeah, really.
It's kind of weird.
Got to read one of these books about it.
Yeah. And then 2 days later, they're in New Jersey in a place called Wildwood.
Yeah, the one place outside of the Midwest.
Which is, as I have understood it, was what the majority of that show is drawn from. I think comes from the Davenport and Wildwood shows.
That's interesting.
Yeah, really. Because in New Jersey, no New York shows, even though they were a hometown New York band.
Well, the Davenport show is the only thing that any kind of mention is made on the actual album as to where they're at, where he says in I think Let Me Go Rock and Roll, he says, "Come on, Quad City."
Yeah, because Quad City in Iowa was still like new to me. Like I hadn't heard about that.
Well, I didn't know about this until I read about it probably like 10 years ago or something. I never knew what he was saying. I couldn't figure out for the life of me what the hell that was.
My kid brain always heard something like "get off your seat" or something like that. Get off your seat.
When I was young, I thought he was like had some weird nickname for Ace or something, because it just, all I could hear was "come on, Quasi." And I was like, oh, he must be calling Ace that or something. I don't know.
It sounds like a Mortal
His name is
Kombat
Quasi.
character.
This is part of the fun of Kiss, though, and this is the thing that I think gets lost in over time, is that there's so little information, especially when I was young, that you had for Kiss. Less is more.
Yeah.
And you had to fill in the blanks with what you thought a great part of what made this band work so well was because it was what you brought into it with you. It was you could project anything onto them.
A mystery.
And it would come back truthful to you in your experience.
This is back when rock and roll was full of mysticism and everything, too.
But Kiss to the greater degree, because you didn't even know what they look like. I think that's something that got lost, I think, even on them. And I think it's lost to other fans, like to rock fans that don't like Kiss. Mm-hmm. I think if you don't like Kiss, it kind of says something about a person's own sense of imagination and creativity, or whatever you want to call it.
I agree with that.
I think the more someone made this week, all of us saw the post on or on Facebook where they were saying Rush fans and Kiss fans. Yeah. But Rush fans, I don't seem to have that same, they're more into the brainy esoteric.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's way more
math rock.
It's way more esoteric than Kiss is.
Those are the kids when I was in school that didn't play with their toys.
They kept them in the box on their wall.
Yeah, they kept them. They were.
I'm a little of both.
See, Kiss fans wanted to go party and and drink or whatever. Rush fans wanted to read Ayn Rand.
Yeah. Just whatever, boring.
I love Rush, but that's a whole other podcast.
And it's still so interesting that those are still so diametrically opposed sounding and mentality type bands, yet they toured together.
Well, I think early on, Rush was more of a direct rock and roll group. If you listen to that first album, which
this was before
to me the only album that's worth listening to.
Again, this would be a whole other podcast. But the first Rush album is way more Led Zeppelin than what Rush became.
Yeah.
You just triggered Cap's rock and roll
history
sense.
It's like being a Kiss fan. It's just like, I know you hate Rush. I get it. You're cool.
I hate Rush. I'm just saying they're just not. They just didn't capture my imagination as certainly as a kid that Kiss did. And that's my point, is that Kiss sort of exists in its own self-contained context. If you start trying to compare them to other bands, they're going to come up different.
Exactly.
And they don't have to be contextualized towards other bands. They exist only in their own self-contained context. And again, what you get out of it is what you bring with you.
Yeah.
The less we knew about them, the better it was. That heightened the mystique, that heightened the excitement, that heightened everything. And it kind of gave that cult following its own sense of identity, because it was the shared understanding. you're this sort of outsider status that you all shared because you're probably the misfit kid at school, or you feel that you're the misfit kid at school. You might even have your own little troop of friends that are equally misfits. Sure, you're fitting in, but you don't see yourself as fitting in.
You don't have your tribe or anything.
And you're building this tribe, and it's all built around this idea. It's less than what the band is than what it means to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's always interesting to me to find other people as I've gone through life and hearing their perspective and their take on something. All of this is going to evaporate in time, obviously, and we'll talk about that as we go into other episodes down the line.
Right.
But right now, everything that they're doing is building this special identity, and that identity isn't the identity of the band. It's the identity that the people that love the band, their fans, are pulling from it.
They're all part of it.
And
I think the packaging on the album really celebrates that.
Well,
absolutely.
It does, and it kind of gives you, this is going to be the first album that kind of gives you any sense of identity because of the way they've packaged this.
They wrote notes specifically to you, the person that bought the record.
Right, but it also, and more importantly, gives indication of them as individuals.
Mm-hmm.
There's little individual notes. It gives, each one is written, for lack of a better term, in character.
Exactly. It's all different fonts and writing styles.
You've got an idea of these guys, but now you're getting an idea of their character because for the first time now they're communicating in a more direct way as an individual via these little handwritten notes that are,
I was about to ask who's got
reproduced on the inside of the record.
Yes, and I was about to ask who's got the notes.
I'm going to go ahead. I'm pulling them up now.
Well,
so the legendary thing supposedly behind the notes, if we do want to get into that just a second, Peter did not physically write his.
Of course not.
Okay, no, they're a little hard to read. Here we go. Yeah, Aces starts off, "Dear Earthlings, the gravity on Earth isn't quite the same as it is on my planet. I swear." Gene or someone made him put that in as a nod to him falling on stage all the time.
Maybe, who knows? I mean,
no, that sounds fucking stupid. Write it.
Who knows? I don't. It wasn't that. We could sit here and pick apart as to the reasoning behind it.
Yeah.
But the ultimate reasoning is now, for the first time, Kiss is giving some insight as to who they are as individuals.
Right.
You've got this perception already. You're kind of. We gotta remember. It's not the information age like it is today. You're having to fill in the blanks on a lot of this stuff. The best you might have at this point is if there's been any kind of article written in a magazine about them.
Yeah.
And that's going to still be fairly limited at this point. They haven't broken big enough that they're going to attract that kind of media interest yet. Certainly not just, certainly not on any kind of mainstream level, but even in just the rock press.
Right.
And they're kind of almost ridiculed by the mainstream rock press at this point.
Exactly.
And would continue to be.
Yeah, he's like, I'm slowly getting used to the gravity here on Earth. I've always wanted to play lead guitar and express myself visually to an audience. When I play guitar on stage, it's like making love.
These are so awkward, too.
If it's good... this handwriting on this was a little sloppy. We can get each other off every time. Thanks for helping getting me off. Love, Ace.
I mean... But
then Gene's, he kicks it off with "Dear Victims."
Yes.
Peter's is a "Hi Cat People," and Paul's kicks off with "My Dear Lovers."
Oh, my dear lovers. Well, that was the ambiguity that he was going for, as far as you're still coming out of the post glam thing, where that sort of that sexual ambiguity is
yeah. Here we go. Nothing feminine. Arouses me more than seeing you get off on me.
Yeah. Well, hey. But that all worked. I mean, here you've got, again, like I said, for the first time, a little bit of identity behind each individual.
Exactly. I was going to say that's a really good point. Not since the Beatles really has like a whole group kind of express their like individual personalities like on a packaging of a record like that.
And it works because you're establishing now that Kiss is a 4-man group. Each person, one is not more important than the other. Now
exactly.
Now they're going to sell this to the moon that it was my idea or it was our idea or whatever. But at the time, it's a 4-wheel drive thing. Everybody has his own role. Each
Everybody's
one's
a star.
important. Everyone's a star, and that's a big part of drawing in their audience even more to them, and it's making this unique cult thing. And now it's expanding to the point, this cult's going to overgrow to the point where it's not going to be a cult anymore. It's going to become
the Kiss Army.
That's the other thing that's in play here. It's a good point to transition on. The Kiss Army is forming in
around the same time period.
Around the same time. There is, of course, the story that is told, which I think is a gross exaggeration of what actually occurred.
Yeah.
But
it's like the radio station in Cleveland?
No, I think it's in...
I'm actually getting that pulled up now. Yeah, it says in January 75, Starkey and Evans, two teenage Kiss fans from Indiana, began contacting local radio station WVTS in an effort to get Kiss music played. After being repeatedly turned down by program director Rich Dickerson, appropriate name, Starkey and Evans began calling WTS, claiming to be the Kiss Army. Additionally, they sent letters to the station and signed them Bill Starkey, president of the Kiss Army, and Jay Evans, field marshal. By July 75, WVTS had begun playing Kiss records, often referring to the Kiss Army. Some of the letters included threats to blow up the station. Before long, listeners started calling in and asking how they could enlist.
So yeah, there's a lot of variations to that story.
I think Dickerson, or whatever his name is made up.
But once Kiss got wind of this, or I should say once Aucoin got wind of this.
Yeah, that's better.
That got turned in very quickly to, fan club.
Yeah, exactly.
And
They're like, ooh, perfect.
Here's something here's where I failed to do the research on this is it seems that I recall seeing somewhere that Starkey, what was his name?
Bill Starkey.
Bill Starkey ended up getting kind of steamrolled under this deal. I think he had the understanding that he was going to be, the president of the Kiss Army and run the Kiss fan club. And that, of course, quickly grew bigger than he was going to be able to handle, and it got taken away from him.
He just kind of get overwhelmed.
He just got ground up in the gears in the making of this thing.
Yeah, I do remember that story.
Which is understandable because it was happening so fast and so quick, because it grew even faster than Aucoin management could keep up with within the next 2 years. Mm-hmm. And we'll get to that later on in our other episodes.
It becomes the beast that eats itself.
So, but this just goes to show how dedicated their fan base is at this point. And this is a young band. I mean, they haven't been, again, they're not 2 years old officially as far as releases go. No. And they're working. They've already got 3 albums out, and they're recording essentially their 4th. Mm-hmm. So all these shows are being recorded. Well, we've talked about that.
Yeah,
we recorded the shows. The ship date is on, I believe, September 10th.
Yeah, this is after they had to go and record all their overdubs and everything too.
Yep. Well, here's what's interesting. There's a lot. Okay, they spend, as I understand, they spend about 2 weeks doing this.
Yeah.
And the only thing that stayed truly live on throughout the whole thing is Peter Criss's drums.
Yeah, everyone always states that the drums have always been live, but then what you were saying, the story changes a lot on what was overdubbed and what was kept.
Well, it doesn't surprise me, and some people feel like this is a cop out. It's not a real live album. Blah 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 blah. This becomes the industry standard. I think it's not unusual to go and doctor up anything that's like poorly recorded. It's like if you're going to get the explosions on tape, that's going to overpower your microphone. An explosion in your room is going to sound like pow, but on the microphone it's going to go.
Yeah,
because it's going to be too much.
Yep.
So they're going to have to augment that. They're going to have to do stuff like that.
And I totally drink the Kool-Aid. When they explain their reasonings for the overdubs they did, every time I'm like, yeah, I get it. And
it makes no difference,
and
really.
VH1 actually did that classic album special in the mid 2000s where Eddie Kramer was actually pulling back some of the original tapes, like on Strutter, like hearing Paul's vocal outtake on that. And I'm like, yeah, I'm glad they fixed Paul doing his
because
like that.
people aren't singing into the microphone, or they're hitting the wrong chords and things like that.
Well, that's because the whole idea is you can't capture that energy on tape. You have to kind of replicate it. And to me, though, at the end of the day, what they've done is they've made a live album that really puts you in the center of it. It sounds great. It's better sounding than, say the Get Your Yayas Out.
I agree with that.
Which is probably more to a true live album, but it doesn't retain that energy and excitement quite the same way.
It's way different.
It's a different thing. Lou Reed's live album, Rock and Roll Animal, is a great live album, but it's a different, again, it's a whole different thing. It's a whole different approach.
Even with the Deep Purple one, it's still kind of like, it's still very, live albums were very jammy at the time too. Yeah, well, even that Lou Reed one.
Yeah. Kiss doesn't jam.
No.
I mean, their jam is the extended
guitar solo and drum solo. That's about it. But those are all part of the show.
End of Let Me Go Rock and Roll, which is a rehearsed jam. They're not freeforming that. So, I have no problem with the doctoring on it. I think what they ended up with, that record it becomes what it is, which is the high mark and the standard for live albums. And I think for all of the naysayers and criticism and stuff, everyone sort of has to kind of kneel and acknowledge that this is the penultimate live rock record.
And let me ask you this on a producer aspect, kind of like nitpicking it just a little bit. So we're cool with the overdubs and stuff. What about the volume of the audience? Because they talk about before how they almost wanted the audience to engulf the music at times, how it would almost overpower it.
Well, to what Russ's point that he made earlier, it puts you there at the show, that audience volume level. Mm-hmm. That's the interpretation I got from hearing all of that feedback from the band and everything too.
I think it works better even, and when we get to Live 2, we'll talk about this more, but I think it just works so much more. It feels so much more immediate, and you feel like you're in the whole.
You're in the arena with
them.
The whole arena, the whole room.
It doesn't, whereas as opposed to, it sounds like it was
the audience pops in at the very end of the song.
Yeah. Or it's
you hear a moderate applause.
Or it just
after
sounds
the song.
You've heard soundboard recordings where it's just picking up from the mics.
Yeah,
right. And it sounds like there's no audience at all. You know, and even though it's a sold out house or something, but
it just sounds like 5 people going woo.
It sounds like a rowdy live show because of all the audience noise and everything. I don't know if we want to go track by track here, but the variations between the studio versions versus the live versions. And to talk about how there's dubs and stuff like that with the audience and the stuff and the guitar dubs and things like that. There's still moments on some of the tracks where you feel a little bit of a live energy to it. I think on Strutter, there's you hear something fall over and things like that.
Well, I feel like we could go track by track, but we don't have to spend a lot of time on each one. Just kind of, here we go. We could kind of name the track and then be like, what's the highlight of this version for you? Since all of them do kind of have a little bit of a different thing. Like, for instance, Deuce, there's not much different, but I love Gene's vocal on it.
I think there's a lot different. I think it's got a lot more charge to it than the studio version. Mm-hmm. And they're not playing, or if he is, it's not nowhere near as pronounced that stutter guitar that he does on the studio version.
Yeah, the digga-dang.
Yeah, I always found that distracting. Mm-hmm. Whereas in live, it's just
da-da-da-da,
they're playing it through. Mm-hmm. It sounds like it works so much better for me. I think, and I think that's such a great opening song. And those even if it's embellished, the big cannon fire at the front.
Oh yeah, it's great.
You just hear that thing go crack, and you're just like, yes. And you're there, and you're sold right off the top. It doesn't take much to go, oh hell yeah,
and then immediately follows it up with Strutter.
Yeah.
It's like shit.
Well, Strutter, it carries it over, but.
Does the extra drum break on it? Does that little tucka 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 then tucka 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 again?
Yeah, they did that. I found that an interesting choice. They double the intro. The studio version only does the round once, and it makes sense for it to do the round twice.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I can't remember if it's the first verse or the second verse, but I can hear something like happening, behind the band, or it sounds like something's happening on stage, like a mic falls over or something like that.
I've never noticed that.
It's something weird. I can't. I'll have to put it on and really listen for it.
I think you're visualizing that special we watched, because on that Paul knocks over his microphone.
Maybe
I think you're visualizing that bit where he knocked his microphone over and someone ran picking it back up.
It may be a subconscious thing on that then.
Because I've done that before. I could have sworn that there was a certain little solo break in a song. Nope, nowhere to be found, and it was like a random live video that I'd found.
Conflating different stuff.
Yeah, that happens to me all the time, and I hate it.
But again, the album puts you there, so
it really does. But I think this is the superior strutter. I love this one. Paul's vocals on it, great.
Well, all of this is superior, I think, is the point I'm kind of getting at here.
Mm-hmm.
All of these blow the studio versions out of the water.
Got to choose.
It's way superior.
But that one I think is the most obvious, where they would have had to gone back and beef up stuff. That
vocals.
Well, not just the vocal, the guitar part. I don't, if you listen to the Boots, them playing what I call the horn part, the that's been beefed up, obviously. But I mean, I would never have noticed that had I not had the A/B comparison, because you're not supposed to notice it.
I wouldn't have noticed that, but as soon as I heard there were overdubs, for some reason the woo and the got to choose. All of a sudden I heard that and I'm like, okay, yeah, they weren't doing that live.
Well, not probably as strong, but it goes to, you go Hotter Than Hell.
Yep.
And then
Firehouse,
the woo, sounds like they're off mic.
Yeah,
well, almost like it's all, and it's left that way, on purpose. And I've never understood why that is the way it is.
I'm not either, but it almost kind of adds an interesting effect.
It does. It almost sounds like they're almost like
gang vocal.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there, but
there's still a looseness to it. There's still like I was saying earlier, just moments of livelihood like that,
and it kind of keeps that vibe going. But
and I love how we totally skipped over Higher Than Hell, because even this version still doesn't redeem the song.
I think with songs like that and Firehouse, another good example too, they just kind of take these live versions and go up a couple of BPMs just because they're in the moment and jazzed, and it kind of gives it a different energy. And
it has that kind of reverberation of a hall, the live. I'm sure that that has to be replicated, obviously, but it works. They do it so well.
Then we flip it on over and we got Nothing to Lose,
which is one of my least favorite Kiss songs.
I still don't get it. Even this version is just it's so good. It
just doesn't.
Peter's vocal is so great.
Yeah, well, Peter's always good.
Come on, do you not like songs about booty stuff?
That's what this is.
It's just
poetry. Sheer
I never
poetry.
thought it was a great song.
I find it interesting.
It goes into Parasite from there, right?
Come On and Love Me.
Come On and Love Me.
And I love that version. That just fucking smokes.
Yeah, that's a great version of that. I'm surprised that didn't stay prominent in their set list as they went on.
I know it. That's just such a banger.
It's such a great song.
And didn't they do a double guitar solo on that one?
I think so.
Yeah, I have. You know what?
I just listened to it this morning. And I was like,
I do. And that's why I was like, what? Because there's a song that they did Ace doubled his solo on.
I know they do on Rock Bottom. There's no solo in the
Rock Bottom. That's what I'm thinking of.
But so they go into Parasite here, right?
Yes, Parasite.
And, that's another one that I don't think later lineups captured. There's something about that I don't know what it is. There's a looseness or a kind of a. I sometimes I'll do this with other bands too, but I'll liken it to a wooden roller coaster versus a steel roller coaster. Mm-hmm. You're going to get a different kind of ride on a wooden roller coaster than you will on a steel roller coaster.
And to be honest,
and that kind of looseness where you're getting kind of throttled around, and you feel like when you get off, like someone's been beating on your ribs. That you get off a wooden roller coaster. That's the feel I get off of this version of Parasite. It's just a lot more raw, and it feels a lot more alive, for lack no pun intended. Yeah, because it's just
well, we've talked on previous episodes about how Ace plays a certain way, and how that's just when you're trying to play behind that's just a different vibe than, say, I would imagine a Tommy Thayer playing it or a Bruce Kulick playing it if either of them did a version. I'm not really sure.
I was gonna say, I think Ace is the wooden coaster.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I
he's
think
a rickety old wooden roller coaster.
I think he's the wooden coaster. He wrote the song. It's his riff. I don't think that anyone could do it justice in that band aside from him.
It's all about the feel, and
plus Peter at that time, arguably almost at his peak with his playing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I would say this and Destroyer era were probably him at his peak.
Where he's going to shine the best in this time, and it's good that they've got this recording because he's really, really flying here.
And also. Again, for us wanting to shine light on members that need it, including Peter, for all the crap that Gene and Paul talk about him with not keeping time, not being able to sing, all that, let it go show on the record that every outlet that talks about these overdubs, again, as we mentioned, did not overdub Peter. Yeah. The one supposed real loosey-goosey member of the band that you never knew what to expect.
Is the most solid element in this whole deal, yeah.
Yeah, so I think he deserves major props on all that.
Well, I mean, he's kicking ass and taking names. I mean, he's just... And this goes in... I think I said this on the last episode. I said there's a lot of... I can't remember if I did, but there's a lot of great guitar players in rock and roll, but there's not a lot of great rock and roll guitar players.
Ace is definitely one of them.
And then you can say this about drumming too. Peter Criss, if he's not a technically proficient drummer, guess what? I don't care. I don't want to hear. You know what? No offense, but fuck that Rush drummer guy. Not that I'm happy that he's dead, I'm not. But you know what? That does more harm to the raw feel of just being an emotive kind of player. I don't want to, could you honestly hear that guy, the Rush guy, trying to play Kiss songs?
Absolutely.
Making it good?
Absolutely not.
Now, this is going to extend to a train of thought that'll go to the guys that replace Peter Criss later on.
I was going to say.
The thing is that Peter's playing by the seat of his pants, and he's playing what he feels. And it makes it a lot more exciting. That gives it its energy. That gives it its, he has a swing to his style, and it's a little loose, and maybe it is a little
and it
out
shines
of time.
Especially on Parasite.
But yeah, all the way through this album. But yeah, I mean, he's just a fucking killer drummer.
He's the perfect drummer for this band at this time, without a doubt.
It's just sort of like, Keith Moon being the perfect drummer for The Who.
Yeah, can you imagine Keith Moon playing with any other band?
No.
Exactly.
But he doesn't need to. And
it'd be a sloppy mess.
Peter didn't need to play necessarily with anybody else, and I don't think anybody else needed to play with Kiss, but we'll
I just love anomaly bands like that. The Who is another good one like that.
Another time.
Then we got She after Parasite.
Which gave us the taste of the Ace Frehley solo moment, the extended solo.
And it's still kind of a piece of music in itself.
It is. And, that whole ride up and then the bend note that he does.
He played all 5 of his solos, as Eric would say.
And it's nothing, I've seen 1,000 guitar players be able, they can play that. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't matter.
I saw Andy Krause when he was playing guitar for your band at one point. He just whipped that out one time in the middle of it. I was like, oh my God, this dude's crazy.
So, it's... it just works so well for the whole thing, how it all kind of... it's not so much what they're playing, but how it feels. And it's all about feeling here.
And you're still hearing the wild audience going crazy over it too.
And that version of She is again
rips,
just way stronger than the Dress to Kill version.
And something that I like about both Parasite, She, and the next one, Watching You, is the production on it. When those first guitars come in, it sounds like a big open room. It doesn't sound like it's crisp kind of coming in your ear. That doesn't happen until the whole band does. Then it's crisp and nice coming in your ear. But if it's just a single guitar, it's that echoey
the
room
ambient
sound.
Quality. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think when we get to Rock and Roll Over, I think that That's an Eddie Kramerism.
I could see that.
He's really
I could see
good
that.
at capturing ambient tones, and I think that's, I don't know if that's a thing, but that's the best way I could describe it.
It makes sense.
Speaking of guitar tones, it feels like, so I don't know the details of it or anything like that, but it sounds to me like Paul's guitars are more from the live tapes, whereas Ace's parts, there's a lot of Ace parts that sound more crisp, like coming from Electric Lady, whereas, there's a lot of graininess to Paul's guitar sounds.
Possibly. I mean, I could see Paul kind of, because they even talked about during those shows, decidedly being like, hey, let's not jump around as much, so we don't have to get as many overdubs. So I could see Paul kind of holding true to that a little better than Ace would.
Yeah, but who's to say?
Of course, it's all hearsay.
Yeah, I can see it being kind of a combination of a little bit of both. They could probably have. Who knows? I don't know if they've multi-tracked that or what, but again, we can only speculate as to what they actually doctored or how much, because like we said, we know that there's at least one vocal part that references a city.
Yeah, I know.
So
it's not all vocals.
Yeah, so it's they've obviously kept a lot of stuff. At this point, like I said, it just doesn't matter.
This is the mystery that we have as fans now.
I know, but it's fun.
100,000 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, do we have much thoughts on watching you?
It's great.
I mean, this live version is better than the other one.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Everything on here is better, I think, than the studio version.
Yeah, that's how you can say about the majority of these tracks. But with moments like 100,000 Years,
the 12-minute long song.
Yeah, you get a bass intro on it. Gene gets a moment, but then you get the drum solo that Peter does with all of the flange effects over it.
Yeah. No, I assume that was something they would do in the arena, but I'm sure the flanges we're hearing it is doctored in the studio.
Might be a little bit of both.
Probably, but I mean, recording off of a board, there's the house sound and then there's the recorded sound. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't know to what end that was probably done in post.
Probably.
But I like this because kind of what Cap was bringing up. So you've got the good intro from Gene, you've got a ripping little moment from Ace, and then you've got a Peter Criss drum solo that breaks into Preacher Paul Stanley that I like to refer to him as when he's like addressing the audience, and then it rips into one more killer Ace solo. So it's almost 100,000 years, even though it sometimes is a drag to get through, especially with as good as Peter's solo is. Listening to it a second, third, or fourth time, it's like, all right, get to the point. But it honestly showcases every member in a really good light.
Everybody gets a moment.
Yeah, it's one of the highlights on that album. I mean, dropped in on the, I guess, third side.
Yep, that's true. Yep,
and,
start with Watching You.
And so it climaxes with Black Diamond.
Yes.
Which would, if you're looking at it as in concert context, that makes the end of the set, so to speak.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're closer before the closer.
You've got the big bombs again. If they're augmented, so what? Everything,
Again, you're there.
I can remember being a kid listening to this on headphones, laying on the floor, and just feeling like I could close my eyes and just imagine what it was like, And I felt like, especially with headphones on, it was like you're there. And I would not have guessed in a million years at that point that any of it had been doctored.
Totally.
I wouldn't have had any clue, and it wouldn't have mattered, I don't think, any more then than it does now. But,
and to throw a little more love his way, Peter's vocal on Black Diamond.
Oh, yeah.
Fierce. Yeah. Holy shit.
That's where he shined. They were always, it seems like they would, once he had Beth, it was like, oh, he's going to be the balladeer, the crooner. And maybe that's how he saw himself. But where he really shines is just belting out some raw fucking
beastly rock vocal.
Yeah.
It's like Rod Stewart if he was tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that suited, Peter so much better, I think, than the Balladeer Peter.
Because it also worked with his personality. We were talking about them building up an aura, having that fierce yelling personality for a Catman character kind of works.
And it seemed like that. And when I was a kid, looking at it again with a limited amount of information available to you, it was almost like, thinking through childlike kind of a rationale.
Yeah.
The cat guy was quiet like a cat.
He was going to be the George
And
Harrison.
then all of a sudden you got this moment where all of a sudden he's just like,
You just didn't see it coming.
You never see it coming. And that's part of what made that really, really cool.
I never thought of it that way, and I totally agree.
That's how Peter became my favorite member for a minute, because we see live footage of him singing Black Diamond. You're like, oh shit, the drummer's singing and is killing it.
Yeah, that's great. And then the bomb outro, and then the audience, but how it starts to flange or whatever. Yeah.
Yep.
And that's not something that was obviously.
I think that also leads true to the 100,000 years being done in post. It almost sounded like the same effect.
Well, as I understand it, what do they call that? A flange?
Yeah.
That occurred. It was a sonic abnormality, an anomaly that occurred while they, because they created that dub of the audience. And it just sounded so cool that Eddie Kramer was like, "Oh, leave that,"
Nice.
And so
I love those kind of happy accidents.
And it leads out of the track, and then you flip the record, and it leads right back in
with Rock Bottom. And I like this one because it fixes the thing I complained about on last episode. It shortens up the intro.
Yeah, I never, I think they could have gotten away with playing Rock Bottom live even without that intro.
Yeah.
I said I like the intro. I think it works.
Yeah.
We got such a great performance from Paul on this version. It's when he started doing the bigger vocal performances.
Yeah, because his Dress to Kill vocal is very subdued. Because it was like, you hit rock bottom and you're there to stay. And then on this one, it's, and you're there to stay. Just is belting it out.
Well, that's your live thing. I always felt like Paul Stanley's vocal in the 70s was way better than it was after the 80s. At some point, he had some sort of vocal training or something, and he lost all his rawness and all his sass and all of it, and it became almost like...
You don't like technically good Paul.
Yeah. I don't,
he moved away from being the wooden coaster to being the steel coaster.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. I like that analogy. I think we're going to go back to that one a few times.
To his end, it probably extended his ability to sing a little longer, maybe. I don't know, but I didn't like it. I like this way, this raw, raspy kind of loose Paul better.
And to be honest, my conjecture, and this is just my opinion, I think him trying to go crazy in the 80s is what's kind of harmed his vocals now. Because look at Gene, he can still hold it together.
Yeah, well, Gene didn't ever sing like Paul did.
But that's my point.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Clean living.
Yeah, I don't know. We can speculate on that. I don't know.
We're not
I
doctors.
just know that I like it better here. I like the way it sounds here. I like everything about what they're doing here. We're catching this band as they're just starting to peak, and we're finding that and even if some of this is replicated in the studio, it's still capturing what it is they do on stage.
I think a perfect visual representation for this record is, how on like a slow-mo cam, like striking a match, you can really see like just the sparks. Like the match isn't lit yet, but you see all the sparks kind of coming off of it. This album almost feels like that mid-spark where it's like they're about to be on fire and it's like they're finally hitting it. It's just that perfect moment in time of right before it explodes.
And it's pretty hot.
Then right after that we had Cold Gin.
Yeah, and I mean,
how many people like the taste of alcohol?
We know now that that's kind of a bullshit rap, but so what?
They're all bullshit raps.
Well, speaking of, what do we think of the raps on this? This is the debut of the Paul Stanley rap is on this record.
Allegedly, I guess if lore is to be believed, most of these stage banner is kind of coming from the Cleveland show. I think that's the holdover.
Interesting.
I don't know if that's entirely factual, but that's the way I've always kind of had it or understood it.
Right.
So I've definitely heard stories about bars serving drinks that were called the Paul Stanley, and their mixes were vodka and orange juice.
Orange juice.
Like some vodka and orange juice.
So, but I think at this point his raps were still good. I think again, also in the '80s is when the raps took a turn because he kept trying to rewrite them, and it's like, you're trying too hard.
So yeah, that's one thing the one thing I was excited about when I saw Kiss a couple of years ago was I get to see Paul Stanley rap.
I know,
but it was like, "Hello, Charlotte."
And we were saying rap, and the kids are going, "I don't."
No, he wasn't. He wasn't spitting. He was doing stage banter.
Yeah, there we go.
Banter.
We'll word it for the kids these days so they understand.
But it worked. And then when you're a kid and you're hearing this, it just sounds like it's an exciting kind of like, oh yeah. And you think in your head, it's like, I want to hang with these guys.
Oh yeah.
Kind of thing.
They sound fun.
Yeah. So they're still selling an illusion, but so what?
At least it's a fun illusion.
It's a fun and entertaining illusion.
Isn't that what rock and roll is? Just selling fun?
And the guys that are the most quiet at this point are the ones that are actually living it. But,
exactly.
for good or for not.
And then we have the song that launched them into superstardom, the live version of Rock and Roll All Night.
And you mentioned earlier about how one of the songs didn't have a guitar solo on the album, but they had it on this version. Same with this song. So what do you think prompted them to be like, we might need a guitar solo now for this?
I don't think it is anything that they can live. It helps extend, I guess, the set or whatever. Again, they were going for a sharp, radio-friendly edit of a single. That we talked about that. The Dress to Kill record seems like it's tailored for radio, albeit what radio station is going to play a song like Ladies in Waiting, I don't know. Or Room Service, or any
insert
of them.
here.
But Rock and Roll All Night, obviously, and I think they have their eye on the prize. And the live, they have more freedom and they can do the put the lead in it. Ironically, that remains in the radio.
To this day.
Yeah, the radio cut of this live version. But that's finally what connects. And I think it's just, again, because it has that manic energy and that drive to it, it connected with people in a much more visceral level than the studio version did because it has all that.
Yep, it has the excitement from the audience. You hear them feeding off the message of I want to rock and roll all night and party every day. You've got them clapping along. So it's like you almost have that fear of missing out, that FOMO thing of, if I don't get it, if I'm not part of the thing, I hear all these other people enjoying it and getting it. And if I don't, I might be the odd one out.
And that's really what it is. Like the first time I heard this song, it was on that, compilation CD that I told you about. And on the back of it, it's, a tour photo of Paul Stanley about to smash his guitar. You see the confetti and then the sparkling drum riser from Peter Criss. And, that's the sound. That song is the soundtrack to that image. And you're like, This is the coolest fucking thing as far as a rock and roll live show.
Oh, totally. And it's no surprise that wound up being the one really hit. And it's just, I wish there were other songs that also pushed a little harder.
I know it's either this or Lick It Up or some shit like that for classic rock these days.
Especially because the last track right here, Let Me Go Rock and Roll.
Well, that's interesting to note that at this point, this is still considered their closer. This is their big one. They're going to go big, and they go with this. This. Rock and Roll All Night has not exceeded this Let Me Go Rock and Roll yet. This is the big anthem for them at this point. And, it has the extended jam.
I was going to say, because they constructed it so. They constructed with the Gene breakdown bit for, Peter to bring it back up with the papa, the boom, boom, the papa, and Ace busting back in. Speaking of, talking about Ace Frehley things that you can sing along, that's one of my favorite little things. Is that da na 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 ba da 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 da. I love that part of the song.
Gene does those little slide ups and everything.
Yeah, he does a little slide and
work.
Really kind of like hammers those strings so it almost sounds like a pluck, but he's not.
That's all musical too. That's not some funk bullshit he's doing. That's all part of the song.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they go out big.
Kiss loves you, rock and roll.
I mean, it's perfect live album.
So what more can you say after hearing that? Even with all the dubs and everything else,
it doesn't need more. It doesn't necessarily. It leaves you kind of maybe wanting more, but it's like it's perfect. I mean,
as a Kiss fan at that time, it's like, all of your favorite songs from those first 3 albums, played better, arguably.
Yeah.
And it has kicked open now what will be now an industry standard to have your de facto live album. And I mean, you look at it, like I said, you can name a handful of groups that had successful live albums. You had Live at Leeds, you had Get Your
Live at
Yagas
Leeds,
Out,
yeah.
You had, Made in Japan, and you had Live at the Fillmore. That's about all I can really think of off the top of my head.
Maybe the Allman Brothers, but yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, after Kiss.
Coming after Kiss Alive, though, all of a sudden, Blue Oyster Cult had 2 live albums. Frampton Comes Alive. That was giant record.
That was post Kiss, though, right?
Yeah. Ted Nugent's Double Live Gonzo, which to me is another penultimate live record. And
Rush, All the World's a Stage.
Well, I mean, fair enough. They had their live album. Of course, another very important live album, Cheap Trick.
Live at Budokan.
Yep.
So, and then Ramones, It's Alive. They had their double live album.
And even that was overdubbed.
Yeah, well, everyone's albums are overdubbed. I mean, that became Eagles Live, which probably was entirely in the studio.
I think so.
But, everyone had their, it became part of the deal.
Everybody had to put out a live album.
You had your live album. So, it really did change the industry. I mean, it's one of the tiny ways that Kiss was influential that they don't get credit for and probably should. And, this album stands as arguably maybe the singular high point of their whole existence.
Their career. This album made their career.
It really did. And it was a tough one to beat, but it established them in a way that they had not previously been able to do on their own with their studio records.
Yeah.
And it certainly kicked them open, wide open to be an established live act.
Yeah, because in the readings in that, they were saying like literally a couple weeks after Alive came out, they already started seeing attendance rise.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
so it was almost immediate. It was like that album hit a week or so later, and it was like, boom, there they go.
It was good. I mean, it still built a little bit over the next, this record came out in the fall of 75.
In September 10th.
Yep.
Yeah, and, the drama's still not over with Casablanca at this point.
So they still have to pay the bills.
Yeah, and within days of the album shipping, Bill Aucoin sends a letter terminating Casablanca, severing the partnership between Casablanca and Kiss.
Yeah.
And now they've got to scramble to fix all that.
But then Casablanca pays the band like millions to stay on board,
They
too.
give them a check for $2 million. Now, where they get that money from, it's hard to say. And to be fair, with Kiss Alive breaking, that's one of the 2-punch thing that Casablanca had, because they had signed this German record producer named Giorgio Moroder, and his diva of the moment was a singer named Donna Summer.
Yeah, that's a little no name.
Well, at the time, no one knew who she was.
Okay, gotcha.
And they had a radical underground hit with a 12-inch disco single, and the song called "Love to Love You, Baby."
There you go.
And that was a surprise hit.
Right.
So they've now got
Donna Summer
and Kiss. Finally giving them,
the revenue
they needed. That success was necessary for them to survive, and that's how this ends up continuing to be a thing. Because otherwise, had all of this tanked,
we wouldn't be.
This would be the last episode of No Time to Turn.
They would have finished out the tour, the album. They might have toured to support Kiss Alive. Now it's hard to say. You could say that they probably would have transitioned to another label, but who knows that that another label would have that same support. That's one thing Casablanca never faltered on, was they always had faith in the band and supported the band.
And never was like, okay,
if they couldn't do it financially.
Yeah. And they never did like we've done 2 records your way. This 3rd record, we're going to do it our way. You're going to take the makeup off, and we're going to do something different.
Yeah, they could have ran into that just as easily.
Because when we did Dress to Kill, it was talking about how they were already out of money. Bogart was going to be in charge of the record already, so clearly the label was being a lot more hands-on with Kiss during Dress to Kill. How far disconnected would that have been for them to go, look, you freaks, the makeup ain't working. We've told you already.
Well, but as we just proved with this live album and the whole thing was absolutely working. I mean, that cult following was just growing and growing and growing. We'll close it out with this, the famously, and this is an important moment, I think, in the history, is they get invited to Cadillac, Michigan.
For the high school football team. And they play that high school. And they come in and play a concert in the gymnasium. Now, can you imagine being a kid and having Kiss, even if they're relatively, quote unquote, unknown at this point, the breaking band, though, come and play in your high school gym?
God.
With their full show, probably, too?
Well, very close to it. It was a little bit scaled down, but,
This was in the 70s. You could still bring us a little bit of fireworks into a gymnasium.
Yeah. But, and then they, of course, you've seen the photos that exist of them, on the football field, and the entire school is painted up with Kiss makeup.
It's crazy.
The helicopter comes in, of course, famously only can fly a mile, which, that's all they could afford, but it was enough to make them have the dramatic exit and entrance. Yeah.
And they get the parade.
But you're right. They received the key to the city, the mayor's there and the town council, they're all wearing Kiss makeup. The local state representative is there. He's wearing Kiss makeup. I mean, it's crazy.
It's like we landed on Kiss World.
Well, and they parade them through the downtown.
A legit parade, by the way.
A legit parade.
Yeah.
And I mean, but I think the important part to note about this is probably the very beginning of a transition where Kiss has kind of sold itself as this sort of kind of, I don't want to say S&M, but there was a certain shade of danger to them, even if it's a manufactured sense of danger. It's still, that was their marketability.
Yeah.
And I think that's when all of a sudden the sights turn and go, we need to really focus on this being a little more kid friendly.
Because this is where the money might be.
The transition from where they go from being just a rock and roll band to now being part of the cultural zeitgeist.
It's not necessarily a transition, but it's the first kind of inkling that, oh, wait a minute, we might be looking at this a little bit wrong.
I agree. I would agree. Totally.
I mean, it's going to be a slow turn, but it really is going to be a very fast turn because everything's happened so fast, hence no time to turn. And so we will discuss this more in depth because another thing happens, and this is going to be my little teaser for the next episode. In September of 75, financed by Bill Aucoin, they're in the studio in September of 75 with Bob Ezrin. Now, what are they doing?
Recording a new record.
No, find out next week.
Yeah, well, are they recording the ground, the basic tracks for Destroyer, or are they just doing demos? I don't know. We'll figure that out. But and it's being, again, this is not being paid for by Casablanca, and that's going to lead us to their next major, very important record, a landmark record.
I'm excited about that one because we've talked about it, about how it's not anybody's favorite here at the table, but there's so much to unpack on this record.
There really is. And I think this is when we'll really start digging into the minutia because exactly as you mentioned, there's a lot of demos for this record.
Well, there's a lot of information out there.
Yeah,
so
it's going to be fun.
I think it's going to be a fun one. So hopefully you're taking this ride with us, and we hope that you'll join us again next time. Until then, I'm Russ Ward, and for Cap Nunn and Alex Stiff, this is No Time to Turn. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. Please insert another coin by supporting the show for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/somethinggoodnetwork.